Let me know what he says. have here the sugya in Yesh Einet Yesh Gittin. Gemara basically comes out that either writes Yesh Einet Gittin. The Gemara wanted to bring a raya. I'm sorry. The Gemara comes out in the first lashon that the Rabba said Ein Einet Gittin. The Gemara wanted to know where did Rabbi get this from. So they quoted a Mishnah. At the end of the Gemara quotes a Mishnah. The person gives a get, me'akshav im no basi, and you base chodesh, and beis top you base chodesh. So it's a get. In fact, the Gemara mays, that's Einis. Rashi says, Einach ha'Einis gadu mizu. So you see, that Beis was in Chodesh, that obviously, even though an Einis happened, that's why he didn't come back because of an Einis. Nonetheless, it's a good get. So it proves that Ein Einis begin. So says the Gemara, Dilba Beis Tavka, that on the Yichar Tepo Kameyam. Simple shot is that since really there should be a din of Yesh Einis begetting, which should cause that the get is not a good get. But since he doesn't want his wife to fall to Yibum, so he has active das to override the din of Yesh Einis begetting. That's the Gemara. Comes along time and said, Asakasha. So how come by Achari we don't say the same thing? Achari, the din is that we have a Gemara in Gittin, Ayin Gimel, Achari ain't on it. Pirish ain't a get. Achari is not a good get. Why don't we say this way in Svara, so Nechek Table Kama Yavit? So he answers, the Einet of Shliach Klau, Lo Asik Adait in Shiur to Shiur get. So he answers that Achari is on the Madrega of Lo Shliach Klau, and therefore it's not a good get because of Asik Adait. So Mary Tavis is saying in Yisayim that even if you have the Svara of Lo Nichalei, means that Lu Yitzur, he would have been Asik Adait, he would want it to be a get. But that's like Yishromi Das. But since it's a Ma'isa, it's Lo Asik Adait, so we don't care about what he would have thought had he thought about it. But if it's Lo Asik Adait, then he never overrided the din of Einet Begittin, and therefore it's not a good get because of Yesh Einet Begittin. So what Tavis comes out is that by Misa, normal Misa, which is obviously Asik Adaite, so therefore he overrides it in Yesh Einet Begittin, and he goes ahead and says, therefore it's a get. By Achari, which is Lo Asik Adaite, so he doesn't override the din of Yesh Einet Begittin because he is Lo Asik Adaite. And by Chola, where you don't have the Svara of Lo Nichalei, so he also doesn't override the din of Ones Begittin, and of Yesh Einet Begittin, and therefore there also it's not a good get. So the Gemara is coming out that we would say Yesh Einet Begittin at this point by Achari because of Asik Adaite. We say Yesh Einet Begittin by Chola because it's an Einet. And we don't say Yesh Einet Begittin by regular Misa because of Nichlei Table Kamiyam. That's what Tavis comes out. So comes the Marsha, and the Marsha makes a diak in the Lashon and Taisis. That Tavis says that Achari is Einet Shel Shliach Klau, which is what Tavis says on Gimel Amud Aleph later in Tavis in Ikad Amrei. That Tavis makes that there are three levels of Einet. There's Einet Shel Shliach at all, Shel Shliach Klau. There's a middle level of Einet, and when there's an oines, which is like the Gemara's case later of Paschim Avra, where the Gemara says that we don't say Ein Oines Begitten because we don't say Yesh Oines Begitten because he pointed out even though out there. So the Marshal is medayik from Taifas' lashon that Taifas is saying already in order to answer his kasha. Taifas was mechadesh that Achlari is lo shviach klal. Is this higher level, the third level of improbability. Says the Marshal, though have the interest in name our hashta, the Achlari navi shekla. There was no need for Taifas to be mechadesh at this point that Achlari is in a third category by itself, lo avi shekla. And a havik mokola. Taifas could have said that Achlari is on the same degree of probability of Kala. Kala is we say at this point, we're saying Yeshai Begitten. By Achlari also Yeshai Begitten. But all we have to say for Taifas to answer his question is V'lo Kemeis Alma. All we have to do is to be mechanic between Achlari and regular Meis. The in other words, regular Meis is more common than Achlari. But Achlari and Kol are on the same level. So why did Taifas say this Kiddush that Achlari is on the higher level? Because he's just repeating from what he says how to say later, which is obviously a Taifas thing, because he says, the common, because he has to say it for later, so he says it now too, even though now you don't need it. So in other words, Taifas has a kasha, just to summarize the Shabbos. The Gemara says, the Gemara here on the Beis wants to say that by Kala, Yesh Ein Begitten, and by Meis, Ein Ones Begitten. The Gemara says the reason is because Meis has a svara of Lo Nichal in the Table Kamayam. Now, Taifas has a kasha, how come Achlari is Yesh Ones Begitten? Why is Achlari also Shabbos Svara Neis? In order to answer that kasha, you have to say that Achlari is less common than regular Meis. But Achlari is lo asikadaite, and Meis is asikadaite. But there's no need to make Achlari less common than Chala, because Chala is also, at this point, Yesh Oines Begitten. So the Marshal is saying that the Taifas here did not really have to say cloud, because it could have been, he could have just said that Achlari is on the same level of Chala, just more common than Meis. He only says it for later. That's the Marshal. Okay. Pashas Marshal is very schwer, because when you learn the Gemara, it's a simple mashmal to the Gemara, is that Kala and Meis are in the same level of probability, because the Gemara, the whole Amid, was assuming, till we got to this point, that the Gemara, the Svara of Meis is different, because Onichale, the Gemara was being medameh Meis and Chala. And if Meis is more prevalent, then it's not so simple. You can make that dibya. No, it's muklah, but it's not so simple. So at least the pashtus in reading the Gemara is that Meis and Chala are on the same level of probability. So the Marshal's problem is a little funny. Marshal is having a problem that why did Taifas have to say that Achlari is less common than Chala? All we had to say is because Achlari is less common than Meis. The answer to Marshal's kasha should have been simple, because Taifas held that Meis and Chala are on the same level as the Pashas Mashmos of the Gemara. So since you have to say that Achlari is less common than Meis, so by definition, you have to say that Achlari is less common than Chala. So that's it. So there's like a simple, it's like, there's not such a strong kasha in Marsha, but like where did the Marsha get to assume that Meis is less common than Chala, and on that basis ask this question? It's such a simple answer to answer the Marsha, and then against Marsha, really gives a relatively direct answer. But Taifas says something he doesn't really mean. just answer the question simply by saying that Taivas looks at the Gemara, and the Gemara is mashma that Meis and Chala are the same level. The Rashash also asks on the Marsha, but the Rashash seems to be asking stronger. So what I say would be like the first gut reaction, the Kasha on the Marsha. The Rashash says, Divrei Marsha is Ebed Gumgamin. Now, Kortok are the Kadesh, and the Chilek Kapli those Shia Cloud. Oh, but they ask what a Kuriyama ain't I sign it, after Shia for those Shia. And so the Marsha is saying that you have to put base up on a higher level, those Shia Cloud, because in order to answer Taivas Kasha, you must say that Aklari is less common than regular base, and we know that regular base is Shia for those Shia. Now the Rashash doesn't tell you how do we know that mace is Shia Pedal Shia. The way I was saying it is we could say that mace is Shia Pedal Shia because we could say that mace is on the same level of Kola. You could say yes, you could say no, but we'll say that the Pashas is on the same level, and therefore the Rashash is no Kasha. But the Rashash seems to be saying that the Kasha even stronger. That we know for sure that regular mace is shviach and shviach, and therefore it's mukhrach that Akhbari is on this higher level. What's Chandra Rashash? So the Chapasha of Chandra Rashash is basically the Maram Shiv. Is the Maram Shiv has a, perhaps, I don't know if it's exactly a question, but say it's like a question on the Sugya. The very that there's a problem. The Gemara says Achla Mace is not a good get. I'm sorry, Mace is a get because so that means, by definition, in order to answer Taivas' Kasha, that Mace is less common than Achla. Because by Achari, we don't say no Nichlei Tepo Kabe Yama, even though it's the same Svara, because Lo Hasek Adaite. So you have to say Achari is Lo Hasek Adaite, Beis is Hasek Adaite. Now, the Gemara later says that the Gemara Hasek Kasha, look at the Gemara later, the Gemara says, wants to bring another Raya that ain't known as Begittin, where it says Edom Eha. The who the Amrei Lo Hatsi Mikavla Tanasi Yoma and Navigita. This is the end of the Gemara, about 10 lines about the page. Also the Sof Talas and Yoma, Paskim Abra. You had a case where a person said, if I don't come, and then he couldn't come because of Paskim Abra. The river, the bridge broke and he couldn't get across the river. Amrei Lo Hatsi Dasai. So the Gemara says, you see, he's an Inus, he wants to come. He can't come because the bridge is broken. So you see that Ein Inus Begittin, because the Bible says it's a good get. The Gemara says that's not a riot. Inus the Shliach Shiny, the boy didn't know even know Atne, you the Afshe and Afshe. So when it's an Inus for Shliach, then you don't say, oh, that Yeshar is Begittin. So the Gemara is basically saying that there's something is if you boil it out, do you know Avne, you the Avse and Avshe. So the question asked the Ram Shiv, so by Maze, why do we need this svar of Lo Nichlei Tepo Kabe Yomen? Obviously, Maze is Asik Adaite. Because if Mace is Lo Asik Adaite, it's not the same din as Achari. Even if mace is less common than Achari, once it's Lo Hasek Adaite, it should have the same din. Because once it's Lo Hasek Adaite, there's no halachic reason for a difference between a big Lo Hasek Adaite and a little Lo Hasek Adaite. If it's Lo Hasek Adaite, it's Lo Hasek Adaite. So you have to say that mace is Hasek Adaite. And that's why it doesn't have the same din of Achari. And that's why the chat is that he's consciously thinking, I want to be a get. And he's overriding the din of Yeshar and Begittin by making. He thinks it's Asik Adaite. and therefore he's overriding the din of Yeshar and Begittin. Say, no, if I want to be a good get. Correct the Ramshiv, if he's thinking of names, and he's overriding the din, he bought that even on he should have made it tonight. He should have said, listen, even though I made it tonight, even though bossy, I don't mean mates. Just like by Pascha Mavra, we say, Sintis Asakadaite. So if you made it, then you made it tonight, but you didn't want Pascha Mavra to be included in your tonight, even though bossy. So he bought it on even though Ande. So by mates also, if you didn't want Nisa to be included in your tonight, so he bought it on even though Ande. So the Rav Shiv said the answer has to be that maze is a middle level, meaning that it's mukhrach. That by when do we say iboy even though that's the very shliach. But if there's a middle level, even though it's asik adaite, even though a middle level, then we don't have this far iboy. So it's mukhrach. That maze is not on the bottom level, but maze is on the level of shliach and shliach. In other words, to say that again, the Rav Shiv tied the Rav Shiv has a kasha. Why do I need this svara? The Gemara said wants to explain why by maze we say, even though both by chola we say yesh ayin begittin. By maze, we say, ain't I to begin. The Gemara says, why? Because only Chaytebo Kameyam. Correct the Rav Shiv. What do you need to throw out only Chaytebo Kameyam? Of a different reason. Since he's obviously Asik Adaite, because that's why there's a Svara of only Chalei. Otherwise, it would be like Achal Ari. So you should say the different reason of ain't I to begin, because he brought it, no, even though must be that the only time we say boy that when it's mamish shchiach, but when you have this middle level of shchiach and shchiach, then we don't say boy that nuya. The way the Rav Shiv explains it, because there's a level that he's asik adaite that it might be, and therefore he thinks on the table kamiyavin to override it, but he doesn't bother to make it tonight because he figures it probably won't be. Right? That's the Rav Shiv. It's split. He says that to say you boy that out nuye, that's only when you think it's very probable. When it's not so probable, so you didn't bother doing the effort of a boy that out nuye. That because it's understandable. You didn't think it's going to happen, so you're not obligated on nuye. But in your mind, you do think about it, and therefore you go ahead and override the din item. The Lashon of Rav Shiv is that the main Avna v'no Asik Adaite Shiyeh K'Sover Shlo Yadav Shlo Yavo, and that's why you don't say Boyded Anuye K'Sover Shlo Yadav Shlo Yavo. Because Asik, but he's still Asik Adaite in years Shiyeh get. So it comes out that it's according to what Rav Shiv is saying, is that it's mukhrach. It's not just like what we were asking on the Marsha, that maybe maze is on the same level as chala, and therefore in order for Titus to answer his kasha, he must say that Akvari is on a higher level, both in maze and chala. But it's a stronger kasha, that it's mukhrach. Maze cannot be on the lower level. It can't be on the lowest level of Pascha Mavra, because then we would not need the Svara before they're not new yet. It must be that mace is on the same level of Kala, that it's Shkiach v'lo Shkiach. And since it's Shkiach v'lo Shkiach, if we don't say before they're not new yet, so it's the same as Kala. It's Mukha, there are three levels. There's Achlo Ari, which is Lo Shkiach Klaus, which is less shliach than maze. I should start there. There's Pascha Mavra, which is he's asking a daite mamish. He thinks it really definitely could happen. so it's Iboyle Anuye. There's maize, which is not Asik Adaite that much, and therefore we don't have the Svara of Iboyle Anuye, but it's a little bit Asik Adaite, so therefore you have the Svara that he overrides it. And then you have a third level that he doesn't Asik Adaite at all. So its Taivas has to come on to make it 3 levels. So what is the Marsha saying that it's not Mukhrah? Taivas, there is no need for Taivas to make 3 levels. It's Mukhrah, you know, you're being the Sugya that you have to make 3 levels. That needs to be Rosh Hashem's Kasha. So just to summarize, basically it's the same Kasha, but it's 2 different levels of strength. The Marsha is saying that there's no need for Taivas to say that Achari at this point is less common than Kala. It's sufficed in saying that it's less common than Mez. And therefore, there was no need to say that it's a level of Shoshia Klal. So the simple question is that we could just simply answer the Marsha's Kasha by saying that these mashmos of the Gemara is mashma that Meis and Chod are on the same level. And the way the Rosh Hashanah has the Kasha is Mukhrah that Meis is on this middle level, because if Meis would be on the lower level, then you would have the Svara of Iboida Nuiv and you wouldn't need the Svara of Lo Niche Metepo Kame Yovin to explain why Yesh Einet why Einan is forgiven. That's the Kasha. So the truth is that Rabbi Kiva and Gittin has a different variation. It really comes out the same as the Ram Shif, but just with a different cheshbon, how you create a middle level. In other words, the Ram Shif has this Kasha, this Mimonasha. If Meis is low Asik Adaite, so it should be like Achal Ari, low Achal Daite. And if it's Asik Adaite, so then you should say, even though I have it. So what do I need this Svara of? So the Ram Shim's answer that there's a middle level, that he's Asik Adaite, that it might happen enough to have in mind to override, but not enough to motivate to make a Tanakh. Kiveger's answer, which is not really Nogea, but it's just for she would say the amount of tape. Kiveger's answer is that Meis is the Etzem is low Asik, should be low Asik Adaite, but the worriness of Lo Nichen of Teba Kame Yavim makes him think about it. So therefore, the Gemara, you can't ask the Kasha why the Gemara needed Lo Nichen of Teba Kame Yavim, because without that, it would have been Mamish Lo Asik Adaite. But it's also that there's 3 levels. Okay. Anyway, so there's the Kasha on the Marsha. So the Chayr, there's a very simple answer to answer the Marsha, is that the Marsha does not like the Ram Shif's Svara. And I guess he won't say, well, like the Kiveger's Svara either. But we know the Kiveger. The Rashash will not like the Ram Shif's Svara, that there's a level that a person is Asik Adaite, but yet he's not, we don't say Boy They Not Do Yet. If it's Asik Adaite, then we should say Boy They Not Do Yet. So if the Marsha says, Adarabba, Pukfakir, the fact that we don't say so the Rashash, we have the Rashash, the Ram Shif's Kasha. What is Meis? If Meis is Lo Asik Adaite, it should be like Achal Ari. If Meis is Asik Adaite, we should say Boiderat Nui V'Lavatne. So the Ram Shif's answer is it must be Meis is somewhere in the middle. Ram Shif's Rasha Pasha to hold there's no such thing as a middle. Because if it's Asik Adaite, Boiderat Nui. What I care, well, it's not so shliach. But if it's Asik Adaite, Boiderat Nui. Once something's Asik Adaite, you gotta be matneh. So the Marsha will pass this answer that the sequence of the Gemara, obviously when the Gemara is answering the Gemara has to be saying that Meis is Asik Adaite, different than Ari, and therefore he's overriding it. If its base is asik adaite, so you have the svara of Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. Torah says the Gemara didn't know that svara yet. Whereas only Mechayit that svara later. In other words, Rasha doesn't hold Poshev Shach, not very such a big finish. Rasha, the Ram Shiv is assuming that the Gemara always holds that this svara will be Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. Ram Shiv, Rasha will say that forget the Gemara was only Mechadish in the next step. Obviously, Misa is Asik Adaite, and Misa, by definition, the fact that forget it's Mukhlaf that Misa is less common than Chala, because Chala at the end it has to be Lo Asik Adaite. If Chala would be Asik Adaite, you would have the svara Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne, because Marsha holds anytime something is asik adaite, you have to say Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. He doesn't agree with the Maram Shiv that you can have an asik adaite and still not have the svara of Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. So the Marsha holds that anytime you're asik adaite, you must say Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. So therefore, the fact that Chala, we say, the Gemara is asking, Chala Yeshua is that means that you don't have Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. That means Chala is Lo Asik Adaite. Yet, Meis, we say, Lo Nifei Tepo Kabe Yavim. By definition, that means that it is Asik Adaite. So it's the fair is fakir. Rasha will say that from the Ram Shiv, your kasha is Guba Mukhraf, the opposite. That Meis and Chala are on two different levels. Because Chala can't be Asik Adaite, because if Chala would be Asik Adaite, you would have the Svara Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. And Meis is obviously Asik Adaite, because if it would be Asik Adaite, it would be exactly like Achari. So you have to say Meis is Asik Adaite, and that's why you override it. Why don't we say by Meis, Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne? Ain't nothing we do. But the Gemara says, why the Gemara need the svara of Nifei Tepo Kabe Yavim? Now, because the Gemara yet did not know, the Gemara didn't know yet the svara of Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. But once the Gemara, the Maskana, the Chanish, the svara of Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne, so Ein Lochinami, we no longer need the svara of Nifei Tepo Kabe Yavim. So now the Marsha is very good. The Marsha is saying as follows. You see from the Gemara later, there's Ein Achinami. The Gemara, there's a machlokes between the steps in the Gemara. But you see from the Gemara later, the Gemara is Mechadish, the svara of Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne, that the Gemara is holding that Chala does not have the svara of Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. Which means that Chala is on the level of Shchiach V'lo Shchiach. It's not Asik Adaite at all. Now, it's not Mistara to make machlokes in the steps of the Gemara and the Metzias. We don't find that the Gemara is, you can say the Gemara was Mechadesh, the Svara Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. But the Gemara is not Mechadesh, how Lo Shchiach Chodesh. So if the Gemara, there's a Gemara in the final step, when the Gemara says Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne, it's Mukhraf that the Gemara is saying that Chala is Shchiach V'lo Shchiach. By definition, by saying when the Gemara said, and once the Gemara said in the final step, we assume the Gemara always out that way, because you're not going to make a machlokes in Metzias, in the steps of the Gemara, how Shchiach Chala is. Gemara doesn't say such a machlokes. So it's Mukhraf in the Gemara that Chala is Shchiach, is Lo Shchiach. Lo Asik Adaite. If Chala be Asik Adaite, you would say Yiboida and Lui V'No'adne. Gemara, by definition, is saying that Lo Nifei Tepo Kabe Yavim is by definition saying that it's Asik Adaite, because that's what it means. He's thinking consciously. Lo Nifei Tepo Kabe Yavim. That's why different than Achari, where he's not thinking it consciously. So Minei Yavei in the Gemara says in Marasha is Mukhraf that Misa is less Shchiach than Chala, Pofakir than the Reshash. In other words, again, just to say it over clearly, there's a kasha on the Gemara. Why don't we, the Gemara says by Chala, by Misa, that means that the guy's thinking it. Question, if the guy's thinking it, why don't we say, and if you would say, you don't need this verb, just like by Apostle Mavra, you don't have this verb on the Yichavei, you just have it. It says, so why the Gemara need this verb on the Yichavei? Just say, just say, so the Rav Shiv says that proves that Misa is more shliach than Pascha Mavra. And therefore you don't have this sort of a point of the Maharsha says, by definition, if you say Asik Adaite, once you say Asik Adaite, all according to Rav Shiv, Maharsha, all no Asik Adaite are the same, and all Asik Adaites are the same. Because once you get to the Svara of Ibrahim Nivro Asik, so all Asik Adaites are the same. And so therefore, it's mukruch that you have to say that it's just the opposite. This very question proves that Chala obviously is lo Asik Adaite, and Meis is Asik Adaite. Meis has to be Asik Adaite because it's for a whole Svara, and splitting Meis from Ochel Ari means that Meis is Asik Adaite. Chala can't be Asik Adaite because if it was Chala would be Asik Adaite, we would say you boiled it on Nui V'lo Ade. So the Maharsha is saying that from this very question, it's very beautiful, the very question that the Rashash or the Rav Shiv uses to prove that Meis is Shliach V'lo Shliach, the Maharsha will use to prove that Meis is less shliach than Chala. Because according to the Rashash is proving it, because why did you need this far of Lichalei? Just say, must be it's a middle level. But the Maharsha, which will hold that no such thing as, if it's Asik Adaite, then you should always say, what is Asik Adaite? Well, you know, I was Adaite, but I wasn't Asik Adaite. I mean, that's double talk. So you're Asik Adaite, then it's a Boile Nuye. So it must be that Meis is Asik Adaite, and Chala is no Asik Adaite. And then Chala doesn't have Boile Nuye. Meis really does have Boile Nuye. Why did the Gemara use Boile Nuye? Because they didn't know it yet. Therefore, they were only using, they had to use the sword. That would be the answer for the Maharsha. I hope I was clear. I apologize if I wasn't. No. And what comes out a very interesting thing, which might make is you could use it to answer a very, very severe kasha in the sleep. The way we're reading the Maharsha is there's only two possibilities, two camps. There's Asik Adaite and no Asik Adaite. If it's low Asik Adaite, so no matter what, it gets not chap. It's low Asik Adaite. Just like by Aklari, even though you have this verb on the Yichalei, if he would have been Asik Adaite, he would have wanted it. But since it's low Asik Adaite, Yeshar is beginning. So if something's low Asik Adaite, it must be Yeshar is beginning. If something is Asik Adaite, it must be pointed out to even He doesn't have this Rav Shiv's middle level. That I was Asik Adaite, but I didn't think it would probably happen. It doesn't hold such a middle level. So therefore, according to the Maharsha, once the Gemara comes out with the sort of Ibrahim and now Meis has to be Asik Adaite, because otherwise it would be like Achal Ari. Once it's Asik Adaite, then automatically you have the Svara of Ibrahim and Anuye. Except you have to say, the Gemara used the Svara of Nichalei, because they didn't know the Svara of Ibrahim and Anuye. But once we come on with the Svara of Ibrahim and Anuye, we no longer need the Svara of Nichalei Tepo Kabayom. So this answers a very, very shver kasha in the Shiur. What's the very shver kasha? That the Gemara quoted this Mishnah that said that me'achshav im lo basi umeis. So it says harei ze get. So the Gemara wanted to make a raya from there that ain't ayat begittin. So the Gemara answered, no, it's only because of meis. Because on this way, they become a young. So comes along Rabbi Kiva, he asks the kasha on Rashi that's good and dandy when you have this verb on Nechle they become a young. But there are cases where you don't have this verb on Nechle they become a young. What if there are children? What if he has no brothers? What if his father died already and he has no brothers? Right? There are many cases where there's no shaykhs to Yibum. So you don't have this svar of Nechle Tepo Kamayam. So then it should come out. If really the Gemara is saying Be'etzem we pass in Yeshar in the beginning. That's what the Gemara wants to say. You want to Hoshana the Brisa is because on Nechle, well, Tepo Kamayam. Well, what about in the cases where there's no Yibum? You say, well, if there's no Yibum, there's no Nafkamina, because anyway, the husband's dead, so what's the difference between dead and Gerusha? There's an Nafkamina, the Gabi Kahuna. Kivega's Kasha. That there's an how could the Brisa say that that the din is that it's a get, and therefore the get means that she's also to Kahuna. We should pass in Yeshar Begittin. The only reason why what the Gemara is saying is ain't others Begittin is because Nichalei, they become a Yavim. So it should come out that in a situation where there's no Yibum, we should go back to the basic din of Yeshar Begittin, and the get should be bought, and she should put it to a Kohen. So that's what Kivega's Kasha. The way I misquoted Kivega, Rabbi Kiva asks his kasha only on Rashi, and he seems to say that according to him it's good. It's a pli atzuma, and there's one of those expressions say harbe dio is nishbach, and that what in the why in the world is this kasha not fair Rabbi Kiva? The exact same kasha, the kasha in the Gemara. It has nothing to do with Rashi. The Gemara uses the svara of Nichale, Tepakam Yavim. There are situations where Nichale doesn't apply because there's no Yibum, so there's no Swerve on Nichai. The person has no brothers, there's no Swerve on Nichai, so it should be, the get should be bought though because of Yeshar and Begittin, and she should be mutter to a Kohen. So how in the world did the Gemara answer the Mishnah? Okay. So Kiveger is Sarachim, why in his chat that he argues with Rashi, we have to, not for now, what he's arguing with Rashi, why according to Rabbi Kiveger's kasha is not fair. I'm not regretfully, I'm not happy with an answer, but it's a very fair question. Chaim asks this question, gives some, I think it sounds very delicate, but it's a very fair question. Why according to Kiveger is not fair? But for sure, when Kiveger asks his kasha in Rashi, that if the whole svara is on the Tebo Kamiyavin, and otherwise it should be Yeshar and Begittin. So in a case where you don't have a Yibum, there should be, the din should be Aser, she should be mutter to a Kohen. So there is a potential answer to answer Kivega's kasha, because there's a Rishash that says the Chiddush, which obviously Kivega doesn't agree with, because otherwise he wouldn't have the kasha. The Rishash says that there's a Gemara in Gittin that says that there's such a thing called Reach Get. Reach Get is, if I say I divorce you only for one person. So the get's not Cham, because you can't divorce a person for one person. But the Gemara says that's a Reach Get, and she's also to a Kahuna. It's some kind of drasha. That you have a quasi get, even though the get's not Cham, makes for this a Kahuna. So the Rishash says in Chiddush that when you give a get, and the get is bottom because of the din of Yesh Einis Begittin, so that's called the Reach Get, and therefore it has to be the Kahuna. That's what Shash's Chiddush. Obviously, they argue Kiveger. The Kiveger's whole kasha that should be a Heter Kahuna. Obviously, Kiveger doesn't agree, but Okay, Rashash is saying that when it gets bottled because of Yesh Ayin Begittin, then you're still also to Guna. So that answer the Kivega's Kasha, because now the Mishnah is very good. The Mishnah is saying, Harei Ze Get. You ask the Kasha, why would we say Yesh Ayin Begittin? We say, well, the Gabi what? If you want to say Yesh Ayin Begittin, and therefore she should fall the Yiba, she should fall the Yiba, so therefore, if there's Yiba, then this Farab Yibam kicks in. If there's no Yibam, then the only nafkamina whether or not it's a get or not a get would be the Gabi Isser Kuna. And since even if you say Yesh Ayin Begittin, because anyway in Isser Kuna, so the Maisa, for all practical purposes, it's a get. It's a get. There's no, it's halachically a get, because if it's a good get to kill Yibam, because when it's a get to Yibam, it's on Nichlei Tepa Kabe Yavim, so therefore he wants the get to be a good get, he overrides the din of Yesh Ayin Begittin, and it's a good get to make an Isser Kahuna, because even if you say Yesh Ayin Begittin, there's a Reach get, and there's a Div Isser, and according maybe with the Deraisa, then according to Pashtus and the Gemara, Reach get is a Deraisa, some can say Drabanan, that Reach get makes an Isser Kahuna. That would be a simple answer to Kivega's Kasha. Problem is that there's a Sefer Naka say, Rashash himself is aware of this problem. His point is that there seems to be indications that Kivega is right and Rashash is wrong. That that when a get is bottled because of Yesh Ayin Begittin, it doesn't make an Isser Kahuna. The Nakas of Raya is from the Rashi of Dilma Beis Dafka. Of Lo Shmei Masya. This is on the second Gemara, where the Gemara says Lo Shmei Masya, the Gemara says because he avoided that Lui V'lo Avnei. Rashi says V'havi get. The din is the get. V'mrotza Tinos Enacha. The Gam Nikuda Nifsaos Me'ayot. So Rashi is a Pliyadik Rashi. Why all of a sudden, obviously if it's a get that she can go ahead and get married with this get. So of course it's a get to Asr to Kahuna. So why does Rashi throw that in? And Rashi never, anywhere in the Sugya before, threw in and mentioned anything about Kahuna. Why Rashi, anyone would have figured this out. If it's a good get, you can get married. So it's surely a good get to Asr to get rid of Kahuna. And why Rashi's throwing it in? So he says, that there's a diak in Rashi, and maybe that's why Rashi's saying it, that's why Rashi's saying it, is that the Chiddush here was that Shmuel was saying, Lo Shmei Masi. You would think that this is a case of Einos, and Yesh Einos Begittin. No, Lo Shmei Masi, because ain't Einos Begittin. So he's telling you that the Gam Nekuda Nifsas Vayom. If you would have said the other way, that's part of that. Louis Yitzur, it would be Shmei Masya, so then you wouldn't be Paso the Guna. So that means, in other words, what Rashi is saying, the Chiddush in Rashi is a diak. That the Gemara is saying Lo Shmei Masya. Why is it Lo Shmei Masya? Because he bought it a little bit of Avnei, and therefore we say, Ein Einos Begittin. Since it's Lo Shmei Masya, so it's a get. Now that it's a get, you can get married. Also, another relevance is, but if it wouldn't have been a get, then you couldn't get married. Okay, that's partial. Another thing is, an afkamina that's a get, is you get Asr Kuna, Mashma. If it wouldn't have been a get, then you wouldn't have been Asr Kuna. So you see from Rashi, this is his diak, that you see from Rashi that the only reason why you're also the Kahuna is because of Lo Shmei Masya. But if it would be Shmei Masya, because Yesh Einos, because of Yesh Einos Begittin, then you would be Paso the Kahuna. So Rashi is beferish not like the Rashash. That's what he says. He also says that they arrived in the Gemara before Mashma, not like the Rashash. Okay, leave that for now. So according to our cheshbon, it's very good because we say like this: we said a cheshbon with the Marsha that once the Gemara is mechadish and svara v'goynei and v'lo adei, then they no longer need the svara of l'nichei tepo kamayavim, because since by definition maids have to be asagadaita. If it wasn't asagadaita, you wouldn't have the svara of l'nichei tepo kamayavim. They could be like aklari. And once mace is asagadaita, then you have the svara v'goynei and v'lo adei. So it's very good. In other words, the Brisa said that if you make a Tanai, it's a Mishnah, sorry. Mishnah says you make a Tanai, me'akshav, and then you die, Harei again. Frank the Gemara, why is it again? It's an Aynes. So the Gemara, we should say Yesh Aynes Begitten. So the Gemara answers, because of the Ifei Kamayom. The question Kiveg is Kasha. The Kamayom only helps when there's Yibum. But when there's no Yibum, you don't have the Kamayom. So why does the Mishnah say that it's a gag? She should be mutter the Kahuna, because when there's no Yibum, when there's no brothers, when there are children, there's no Yibum, there's no firm Kamayom. The din should be that we should say Yesh Hared Begitten, and it should not be a good get. She should go to the Kahuna. The answer has to be the Rashash and Svara that it makes for a Reach a get. Rashi says that we don't hold to that Svara. Rashi says in the very next Rashi, it's Mediyah from Rashi, that Rashi is saying that we don't hold to the Svara of that Reach a get, that Yesh Hared Begitten makes Reach a get. So that's right, because in the next step we dropped it. Once we Gemara is Mechadish and Svara of then it's no longer necessary to be Mechadish to Rishash and Svara, because we have a different explanation for Pshat in the Mishnah. The Mishnah, the reason why by Mays it's not a good get is because he brought out Lui V'lo Adei. And that covers even when nothing doing. You don't need to have So if I ask you a kasha at the end of the day, how come by May you don't say Yesh Hared Begitten? And why did she put it to a Kohen? The Torah says because he brought it on Nui V'lo Adei. Very simple. So at the end of the day, once the Gemara gives the second answer, we brought it on Adei. We drop this far we don't no longer need this far of we have a better answer why it's not a good get, and the day that we answer Kiveger's kasha, why she's also to a Kohen. Why she's also to a Kohen. Because you don't say Yesh Hared because you pointed on Nuya. Therefore, there's no reason anymore to say the Rashash is finished. We go back to like he proves from the Nachman say that from the beginning the Gemara also didn't hold that the Rashash is finished. Now there's the Gemara, some of the Gemara is mash, but they don't hold the Rashash is finished. That the Nachman say proves from the beginning of the Gemara, they don't have time to discuss. But then he brings it right. The Rashash is finished was only needed in the middle step in order to answer Kiveger's kasha, how the Gemara is b'miyashev. The Mishnah, in a case where you don't have the threat of why didn't she also to a Kuda? At that stage, the Gemara would have to be forced into saying the Rashash is Svara. So obviously it's a possible Svara, the Rashash says it. But Gufa wants that the Gemara gives the next step, where then we no longer need the Svara of Nicha Teba Kamayavim. Then the Rashi is saying, then of course we go back to the Pashtas. And we drop the Rashash, we hold like Ricky Veger, that there is no Svara of Reach again when it's Yesh Hared Begitten. And this was very nice, but now a little bit is why Rashi says it here, because the Nakasiyo is saying that Rashi was the Rashi is no purpose. Why Rashi say the Gam the Kuna and Nifsalis? Obviously, if it's a good get, of course it's Pasi Kuna. So the whole Rashi was to teach you a Chiddush that Yesh Hared Begitten does not pass you when you say Yeshua Gittin, you're not possible to Kuno. Right? Rashi say that here. He could have said that anywhere in the page. Should have said that before. Because only now is the Gemara coming holding that way. Because in the step before, we didn't hold that way. So Rashi is going out of his way to point out that the Gemara now can switch. That previously we held, like the Rashash, that Yesh Anis Begittin, even though the get's bottle, because Yesh Anis Begittin, but as a Reach again, it passes you to Kahuna. That answers the Kiveger's Kasha. But now, in the next step of the Gemara, we no longer have to say that because we no longer need the Svara of because we could use the Svara of even though Atne. So, according to the Marsha, the way the Marsha's Cheshbon is that Mace, once you have the Svara, that Mace is Asik Adaite, and really Mace has the Svara of Atne. So therefore, it would answer Kiveger's Kasha on Rashi or on the Gemara. We don't know why it's not true on Kiveger also.